Podcasting is more than just talking. It's listening. BSing with Bob Schmidt.
The BS with Bob Schmidt podcast featuring entrepreneurs, marketers, and business people. This week, talking with Lorri Allison Craig. She's an entrepreneur, an author, and a certified financial planner. Wanted to talk with her about starting up your own business over your lunch hour. And I think that a lot of us as entrepreneurs kind of have that as a dream. You know, we're working our 9 to 5 and we're thinking about the daily grind and the crap that we're dealing with on a daily basis. We're thinking we can do it better. Lorri, is it possible for us to do it better and to, kind of start our business only during our lunch hour?
Well, absolutely. If I did it, anybody can do it. There's 75% of the people that are unhappy in their jobs.
Only 75%? I would think it would be higher than that. There's a lot of people that just hate what they do on a daily. The grind is just there.
So I developed the Lunch Bag MBA so that you could learn on your lunch hour how to start a business doing something that you love.
Is that the key right there, is doing something that you love?
If you are doing something you love, it's not work. It's just a joy, and you don't care how many hours you spend doing it.
Well, I found that. I mean, I really enjoy podcasting. I'm just waiting for the dollars to start rolling in. So how do you monetize the thing that you love to do and end up making a living out of it?
Well, that's a part of it. It's not only doing the thing that you love, but learning the business side of it, the balance sheet of it, and forecasting different ways that you can make money and listing those out. When you do the business plan, that's part of it, is forecasting different ways that you can monetize it. You want to make your mistakes with your business plan, and the business plan is not necessarily for somebody else, it's for you. It's to have that thought process in there, and it makes you go do some research and okay, well, let's look at some other podcasters. How do they make money at it? And find some, entrepreneurs that you can just follow their plan instead of reinventing the wheel.
Do you think that a lot of entrepreneurs try to reinvent the wheel every time? Well, I can do it better than that. And then they're realizing that they're drowning in, man, I spent all this time and I could have just looked at this or I could have just Googled that and, would have had the answer right there rather than spending all the time doing it.
Absolutely. I have to tell you a short story. My daughter grew up on my lap running a business from my home. And so she didn't think anything about it. I mean, she just, as soon as she graduated from college, she started business in her home, and now she runs a multi-million-dollar corporation from her living room.
Wow.
And she was saying to me, Mom, if I'd only known this, or if I'd only known that. And I said, okay, well, that's why I'm writing this, so that people can just, get it in a simplified version, and they know all the different steps. Like one of them is building your team of professionals. It's when you have decided what you want to do, what that niche is, then you want to go find the accountants and the attorneys and that can help you in that particular area.
So you want to get your team together.
Absolutely. You need to get your team going. But before you get your team going, you need to know what you're going to do. You need to know what that great idea is.
Right. Well, you'd mentioned business plan a couple of minutes ago and the importance of a business plan. What kind of details should we put forth in our business plan?
I want to make sure that people don't get stuck. They don't, stub their toe doing the business plan because it's just so big and complicated and daunting and that sort of thing. I think the first time that you do it, you start with a simplified business plan. You go to the internet and you find a sample that's kind of closely related to what you want to do, because it's going to have a lot of things in there that maybe you haven't thought of. So you use that as a template and go through it and, see if you're on the right path or not. I've thrown out more ideas than I've ever actually started a business with. It's probably 5 to 1. So if you do the business plan and the simplified version, you can kind of see up front whether it seems viable or not.
Let me ask a little bit about that, because my mind is always going, oh, this would be a great idea. Oh, that domain name's available. I buy the domain name. I start jotting down things. I start going at 127 miles an hour. Then I hit a wall and I'm like, oh, next idea. And then the squirrel runs by and I look at the squirrel for a while and I forget where I was. And, I'm guessing that a lot of entrepreneurs have that same squirrel mentality that I do. It's like, oh, next thing.
Yes. So I would suggest, it sounds like you have definitely an entrepreneurial brain. So I would start, okay, first you want to get the great idea. You analyze everything that you love. What are the things you like to read? What do you like to look at when you're surfing on the web? What do you like to do? What are your joys in life? And write all those down and shrink them into, the top 3 things that you like. And then do a values work. Like, what's important to you? Is freedom important? Is your home environment important? What are the things that are important? And you fold those things in together, the values and what you love. And that kind of gives you the direction. So it's kind of like a flashlight that you're just highlighting the area that you're truly interested in. And then you do what we call a SWOT. That's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you just do a one-pager. And you evaluate what are your internal strengths of that particular thing that you're interested in. And what are your weaknesses? Do you need to go get some more education or knowledge that would make that opportunity stronger? You want to do an inventory of external opportunities in the environment, like, what are the market economics that are going on right now, and maybe the social and political landscape.
Okay. So, I mean, it's basically, it's a big, long list of things that you kind of have to look at in order to jump in with both feet and be ready to be buoyant when you do jump into the water.
It's a lot cheaper to make your mistakes on paper. So that's where you want to do them. It's just like, building a house. When you hire an architect to help you designing your house and everything, you want to make those mistakes on paper rather than getting into actually framing the house and you're like, oops, I want the wall over there, and making changes after you've gotten started. It's much better to do it up front.
Well, you had mentioned also earlier about your daughter sitting on your lap as you were going through and doing some of the stuff earlier on in your career, and how your daughter took that and moved that into an opportunity for herself. I've been kind of a closet entrepreneur my whole life. I was a radio guy for 30 years, and then when I got laid off from radio, I jumped in both feet to do podcasts. And it's funny because 2 of my boys started their own businesses this last summer as well. I've got a son that's got a food truck now and another son that makes fishing lures. So they jumped into some of the things that they enjoy doing and are making money that way,
Excellent. Well, see, you were a great role model, and that's another thing that's important about being an entrepreneur and working on your own, is that your children get that model, and it takes away the fear for them. It's like, hey, Dad did it, I can do it. Just the same thing with my daughter. It's like, that was just totally normal to start a business in your home. So there was just like no fear. It just never occurred to her to have fear of that.
Well, you'd mentioned that being kind of a leader that way. You'd mentioned earlier before we got on the air that you were talking about that you're also a coach and a mentor. And I'm guessing that a lot of times that somebody that's starting off a business wanting to get going in something, how does somebody end up getting a coach or finding the right mentor for what type of entrepreneurial adventure that they have?
So there are a lot of business coaches that are out there. I would suggest getting a business coach in the area of the business that you're interested in. I've had coaches, I've had personal coaches, I've had business coaches, and I would just suggest that you do like a web search talk to people, talk to your team, your CPA, your attorneys, and get referrals that way. I've mentored people in the financial industry. I feel really strongly about giving women opportunities, so I mentor my assistants into becoming certified financial planners and professionals on their own.
Uh-huh.
So that's how I mentor people coming up. So it's in industry specific.
Do you think that most people are willing to help out the underdog or the person just starting up?
I think a lot of people do. I think they have just that tender button that they want to help people starting out.
A while back, I interviewed an author, Ralph Heath. He wrote the book Celebrating Failure, and I'm assuming that as an entrepreneur and as a person that's starting up, businesses on a regular basis, you've probably had lots of failures to go with some of those successes.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. You just have to embrace those mistakes and know that it's a teachable moment, and it makes you stronger. I think about Olympic athletes that talk about how many things that they lost on the way to becoming an Olympic athlete. So you have to embrace that.
Do you have an example of embracing a failure that perhaps would help somebody listening right now?
I think one of the things that I did that I would hope might help people who are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur and starting a business was I was helping my husband, who is a financial advisor in his business. And honestly, I was just kind of sitting on my tush and letting him run the business. And I was just kind of like the assistant answering the phone, even though I had all my licenses and everything. I just, honestly, I was letting somebody else do it.
Mm-hmm.
I was letting him do it for me. And then he was diagnosed with cancer and given 10 days to live. And I just went into shock. I was like, oh my gosh, he's the one that makes the money, and what am I going to do? And so, there's a lot to the story. I also am into health and diet and nutrition and that sort of thing. And so I went to work on him, and he ended up living another 15 years.
Oh,
but
wow.
He was very ill for a while, so I had to take over the business and start running it while I'm trying to save my husband's life. Let me tell you, you are 100% in charge of your life, and it is a huge mistake to sit on your butt and let somebody else do things for you. I have a lot of clients that come in, and I see women that are just allowing their husbands to make all the investment decisions, and they just don't have a clue what's going on, and they have no interest in what's going on. And every single person has to make sure that they're okay on their own. And I'm not against partnerships or anything like that. It's just everybody has to take responsibility for their own life. And I think being an entrepreneur is one of the best ways to do that. It's something that worked for me.
Well, let me just say this. It's the beginning of a year. It's the beginning of a month. It's the beginning of, somebody's life, really. Now is the time to take that chance, and now's the time to jump into it and check it out. As you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, that 75% of the people out there hate what they do for work. Why not change that into 100% of people that are out there love what they do because they're working for themselves?
This is a perfect time to do it. It's like, okay, 2019, I'm going to change my life. I don't want to go to work to a place that makes me unhappy and causes stress, and stress causes cortisol to go through your system, and all that cortisol in your system can create cancer and other health issues. It's very, very important to do something that you're happy, health-wise and psychologically and emotionally.
Is now a good time? Is 2019 a good time to start your own business?
Well, I think just about any time is a good time to start a business. I remember changing consultantship, I guess you would say, The morning that the Lehman Brothers crash happened. I remember Lehman Brothers was going bankrupt, and I was having a conference call interview with 7 different individuals in a C-suite with a company to become a consultant. And I changed. I changed to that company, and I was in finance. I mean, I don't think anybody can pick a worse time to do something like that, but it ended up working out. It's just like you make it happen. You have this incredible power inside, and you just make it happen.
I'm glad that you said that, because do you think that people have the power to do that on their own? Because many times I've had that crap happen to me, and then all of a sudden something good happens because I'm thinking and I'm working and I'm trying to make that happen, and it does happen. But does everybody have the power to do that, do you think?
Yes, absolutely. They have to be aware when opportunity knocks. They have to be in position to
open the door,
act on that opportunity. Yeah. Yes, there you go. So that's one thing. And that kind of goes back to having your emergency reserves and being structured correctly financially, so that when opportunity does knock, you're available. And the more that you start exploring what you want to do and taking action, I'm a big believer in the universe hears you. And all of a sudden, these interesting doors and opportunities start to happen.
I think a lot of it is just keeping your eyes open and looking at, not really looking for that opportunity, but knowing when to jump on it when it's actually there.
There you go.
Lorri, how do you discover that great idea? What's that point where you're like, oh, the light goes off and you hear the angels and the sky opens up and the money starts falling from the sky. How do we know when that opportunity is there?
Okay, first of all, the money doesn't fall from the sky.
Damn it.
But it takes frickin' hard work. But I gave you kind of a tidbit of, how to start. And that's writing down everything that you love, everything that you're interested in, and picking those top 3 things. You just you don't do it like in an hour. You write everything you can think of that you're interested in and let it settle. And especially in the morning, wonderful inspirations come in the morning. So I love to journal next to my bed and just start writing everything that you love to do, and just make it an exhaustive list, and then melt it down to those top 3 things. I'll give you an example of how I kind of figured out my thing. So I love finance. I've always been an analytical person and didn't realize it. I thought I was a creative, but what I did was look at art and marketing materials, and I analyzed it and analyzed how it worked. So one of my businesses was a marketing firm. So I thought I was a creative, but I wasn't. I was an analytical.
Oh, really?
So I've always loved math, and I always tested out really well in math. And then when I met my financial advisor husband-to-be, I was just fascinated with finance. So I love that. But I'd also done yoga since I was 12. And I love that. Well, what does yoga and finance have to do with each other? And also, I'm very interested in nutrition, particularly after, the story I told you with my husband. I learned all kinds of nourishing things to do to your body and build the immune system. So those were the 3 things that I loved. It was like finance and health and yoga. And so I took those 3 loves and I wrapped them up together and help people not only with their finance, but health has a big influence on your financial stability. If you don't have your health, it can just devastate you financially. Mm-hmm. And then the yoga meditation piece of it. And then I went and took a look at my values. Well, okay, what was important to me? Well, I'm an adventurer. And I love freedom. I love travel. I love friends. So I wrote down my top 5 values. Like, okay, well, how about if I do this business that wraps 3 things that I love and allows me to travel? So I work on the cloud. All my software is something I can do anywhere. I can be in Vietnam or Laos or Cuba and still work on the cloud and connect with all of my financial clients that I have. And I can also keep up my online business anywhere in the world that I want to be. So that's just an example of how to wrap what you love and make it consistent with your values. And then when you have that great idea, it's like, okay, is this great idea going to take me where I want it to go?
Lorri Allison Craig is my guest on the BS with Bob Schmidt podcast. One of the things on your media sheet says the only thing standing between you and wealth, health, and power is you. And I'm a strong believer in that you are the person that's holding you back, and you are the person that's responsible for your success. And I think all too many people don't take personal responsibility for themselves. And that ends up being a failure in many different ways because it can, wreck the forward momentum. It can also drive wedges in between people if they're not taking personal responsibility.
You're 100% in charge of your life. And if you are blaming somebody else for where you are, I'm sorry, you made that decision for where you're at, and you have to take responsibility. And so often I see people stuck just because they're blaming where they are on somebody else.
Time to take responsibility for yourself is right now. Lorri Allison Craig, how do we find out more about how we can start a successful business on our lunch hour?
Well, you can go to my website, wakethewarriorwoman.com, and go to workshops, and the Lunch Bag MBA is on that workshop page. It's free until February 1st, so this is a great opportunity to go in and take the course for free and learn how to start a business.
The BS with Bob Schmidt podcast is brought to you by Orange Computer. Find them online at orangecomputerlax.com. And by Tri-State Sound and Light. Find them online at tristatesound.com. Tell your story with microcasts by podcastforhire.com. The BS with Bob Schmidt podcast is a Podcast for Hire production.